Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here, or Tank12, however you call me, I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks, where we are today reviewing the grand FV215B 183. And before we jump into the review, look at the characteristics, I just wanted to apologize because I made a mistake. In the polls, I did write that this tank is a Bond tank, and I was completely wrong. I was thinking of the FV215B, which is the used to be the tier 10 heavy tank for the British tech tree, and I kind of messed it up. I mixed it up, and I wanted to make a review on this, and I gave it the notion that it's a bomb tank, but it's not a bomb tank. You do not have the ability to buy this tank unless there is once more a black market coming in where you can maybe pick it up for 50 million credits, and you have to go into an auction against other players. The FV215B 183 does no longer exist in the tech tree, and you don't really have any option to pick this up unless there's a black market coming around. So this is a very rare tank if you just started playing the World of Tanks, but it definitely is seen quite a lot still around because yeah, this tank, everyone had it when it came into the game. So no worries, there's still the FV4005. It's the same gun, it's just a different chassis. It's faster and it lacks the protection that this tank has in some areas, but we can talk about that, all of that at a later date, where I'm going to be reviewing the FV4005 in the future, definitely when I do buy it. But you can see I'm a bit short on credits right now, 49,000. This tank does eat a lot of my reserves because it's just I'll tell you guys why it eats so much. Let's jump into the firepower tab, because that is the main reason why this tank does eat up so much of your credits. The AP shell has 1,150 damage. Alpha wise, it can go all the way to 1,438 with the RNG. You'll usually be dipping in between 1,200 and sometimes even below 1,000. But the alpha is really, it's mad, because this is the biggest gun you have in the game that is not an artillery piece. You have 310 millimeters of penetration, which is crazy to think about. You basically can penetrate everything from the front usually. There are some rare exceptions, but most of the time you'll be able to go right through those vehicles. Your rate of fire is trash. That is to be expected with a boomstick of this size. Well, you only have about 2.64 rounds per minute, but that's with the caveat that you're using the right equipment and you're using the right consumables and everything to get that to that level, because it's actually worse than that. Your loading time usually will be almost 30 seconds, or 30 seconds to be exact, I think, back in the days. And also your gun traverse is horrible, 18.2 degrees per second, and you only have a 90 degree gun arc, which makes it very limited. If someone is moving in from the side or behind you, you'll have to move your tank completely, which is a bit of a hassle because this is a very large tank. It has a very big profile in terms of height and also length. If we pick the E100, you can see it's about as big as the E100, and that will make it very difficult to hide. We'll get to that in the concealment tab down later, but just so you know, it's very difficult to hide this tank. Once you go light up, people will notice you. You have 5 degrees of gun depression, which isn't great. 15 degrees of gun elevation, which isn't that great either. But, you know, this big gun, it needs some place. It needs some space to operate. And, you know, if you would be able to angle it down further, it probably would break off or something. But either way, your gun depression is bad. Your gun elevation is not that much better. Your aim time, on the other hand, for a gun of this size with the right equipment is 2.72 seconds for a fully aimed in reticle, which isn't too bad. With the right kind of equipment, with special bond equipment, you can up that by a bit, probably still more, and you can get the aim time down by maybe 0.2 2 seconds. The dispersion at 100 meters, I thought it was going to be worse, but actually with 0.35 with the right equipment and everything, it's actually not too bad. So you can still hit your targets even from range. I've managed some very, very nice sniping shots with this vehicle. I don't think there's a compilation of that on my channel, but there are some videos that I've played this vehicle, even on live stream, where I got like 7k damage. So I might just, you know, I'm just gonna put the link in the description if I find it. The DPM obviously is going to be great because of just the bare alpha damage that you have, and that's just with the AP shells. I mind you, just with the AP shells. We'll get to the HESH shells right now. So let's take a look at the ammo loadout that we have on this vehicle. One of the reasons why it's so expensive to run this tank, you have, as the British usually do, a different kind of premium shell instead of the heat shell. You have a HESH shell, and that is a high explosive squash head round, I think. And that thing does up to 2,188 damage. That's basically a one shot to quite a few tier 10 medium tanks, quite a few tier 10 tank destroyers, and quite a few tier 10, I think, heavy tanks as well, some of them. But if you roll that high, well, that's in the stars, right? That's the highest roll you get. Most of the time you roll about 1,400, 500, but that's still pretty crazy. But you have to pen those kind of shots, right? Penning those shots usually is quite difficult if you have the non-premium round. It's also a HESH shell. No, actually, wait, let me check real fast. It is, it's just a high explosive shell. Okay, so the non-premium round is a high explosive shell with the pen of 92 millimeters. Against slightly armored tanks, you're going to be doing the same amount of damage. You have the same shell velocity. Everything works about the same, but you do not have the same pen that you have on the HESH shell. Now, the HESH shell on this tank has 230 millimeters of pen. 230 millimeters of pen is going to be very, very nice in a lot of scenarios. Most medium tanks will have a very bad time when they come out in front of you. Some heavy tanks will have a very bad time if you have a weak spot. And tank destroyers, if they are not armored at all, well, they're going to be running towards the hill, screaming and begging for you not to one-shot them. I have one-shot Guerrilla 15s. I have one-shot E50Ms. I have one-shot so many light tanks you would not believe. I have one-shot T110 E5s. I have one-shot... I have to check. I think I ammo-wrecked Super Conqueror once. I ammo-wrecked quite a few other tanks. So this is a tank that hits extremely hard. This is the reason why everyone plays the vehicle. These HESH shells are a hell of a lot of fun. And I don't even feel bad about using them because everyone is slinging gold at tier 10. And I don't usually sling gold when I play my tier 10 vehicles. Like on a very rare occurrence when there's a tank that I just cannot penetrate. The FVs, you know, the Chieftains, the 279Es. But I don't do it with other vehicles. So I kind of feel like I am able and I should be using this vehicle to its full potential by using the HESH shell, which does about 1,750 damage or almost 2,000 damage if you get very lucky. Now, one of these shells costs you 8,000 credits. That's one of the reasons why you lose so much money when you're playing this tank, because you need some other equipment to run it as well. Now, what I'm doing is I have premium consumables. It gives me plus 10% on all of the characteristics and on my crew skill. I am using Commanders in Arms and Brothers in Arms and Intuition, obviously, as well. Right there, Intuition is a super important perk nowadays. I'm using a Directive, I'm using Gun Rammer, I'm using Improved Ventilation. All of these things are extremely important when you're running this tank if you want to get the most out of it. Now, let's talk about the survivability. This thing has 2,000 HP, or if you're lucky, one shot if you're facing another vehicle. And its armor is actually quite interesting. This tank used to have very bad armor when it first came out in the non-HD variant, and the hull was very easy to penetrate. Nowadays, it's still 152 millimeters, 51 on the side, 76 on the rear. But the armor actually has improved quite a bit with the HD model. You'll see people bounce some shells now off the upper plate because of the angling. The turret kind of bounces more shells because it has 254 millimeters of armor. It used to be really bad back in the days. You have 178 on the side, only 32 on the rear, so be very careful of that. But usually when you're out at the front and someone shoots you, there's a high probability that if they shoot your turret, they might bounce. And because you have this boomstick, people do not want to get in front of you, and they kind of panic when they see you coming around the corner. So you do have a bit of an advantage. The armor is not bad, it's not horrible, but the armor can definitely be easily outmaneuvered when they start firing premium ammunition. And if they find your side, or if there are several vehicles, they will not be bouncing. I promise you that if you fired your shot, they will not be bouncing, because they'll be sitting in front of you for 22 seconds until you'll be able to fire the second shot, and you will not be able to do that, trust me. They will finish you off very quickly because they know they do not want to lose 1,750 HP to that second round. So survivability is not too bad on this vehicle, but I think at distance, the chances of bouncing shots are quite a bit higher than if you're in close quarter combat, so you'll have to look into where you position your vehicle. Moving on to mobility. Now, you'd think that this tank wouldn't be very fast, and it isn't. Only 34.3 kilometers per hour, but to be fair, it could have been worse. I still think you can move from point A to B. Obviously, you can put a I mean, I wouldn't do it, but you could put a turbocharge in it. If you're a quickie baby, you probably have a turbocharge in this bad boy, but you don't really need it. If you want to have more mobility, you can just go for the FV215B, which is a very different kind of playstyle because of the mobility that you have. That's probably a lot more interesting for a lot of the players either way, because they just don't have access to this FV215B 183. Your traverse speed is also not very good, and neither is your specific power to weight ratio. It's a tank destroyer that is not mobile. It's a tank destroyer that's supposed to be sitting at one place, and maybe if it has to reposition, it can reposition, and then it's supposed to, you know, strike and hit very hard. Moving on to concealment, this is not a very good concealed tank. It's very large, it does not have a very good camo rating, and you'll not be doing very good in this tank when you're trying to stay concealed. Trust me, you can probably up it by a little bit, but it's very difficult to get the concealment high because it's such a large vehicle. Spotting wise, that is actually not too bad. Let's check the base view range. Base view range is 390 meters. For a tank destroyer, I'd say it's about average. It's not too bad, it's not the worst, but I have the feeling that I do spot a lot more than I should be spotting because of all the skills and everything, because view range is important if you're playing any kind of vehicle. But either way, I think you're going to be doing just fine with all of the, if you push the stats a bit, 433 with the T and everything. I think that's far enough for this tank. Most of the time, if you're only by yourself, you'll not be needing to spot for yourself because there's always someone in front of you if you play it correctly, or if you're in close quarter combat, it's not as important either way. So, what can this bad boy do in close quarter combat? Oh, let's talk about the field modifications real fast. I have not touched the field modifications because I haven't really played the tank without, with putting the XP in the vehicle, put all the experience on the crew. So there are quite a few things that you can do actually right here. What you can do is you can actually improve the accuracy, you can improve the aim time. What I would probably do is I go for the aim time because I think aim time is more important than accuracy, because it's always kind of a little bit RNG in there. So aim time, at least that thing is certain. Then you can go either for a bit better concealment or some more meters view range. I'd go for more meters view range. Then you can go for even more improved aim time, but you'll lose a bit of the DPM. Or you go down the line of get more DPM, but you lose a bit of aim time. Now the thing is, with the right kind of setup, I guess you can get the aim time down and also get the DPM up at the same time. And then you can also get one of the get more HP or get better reverse speed. Since this tank doesn't have a lot of HP, but it also does not have the best mobility and okay protection, I would probably go for, yeah, I'm thinking I'd probably go for either. Maybe I wouldn't choose any one of them. Because I don't want to lose more HP, and I also don't want to lose 4 kilometers per hour or 1 or 2 kilometers per hour reverse speed, because reverse speed in this vehicle is going to be quite important when somebody gets around you. And the final one is it does give you the opportunity of adding a scouting or survivability slot, which both are not very very nice. But if you're using improved ventilations, you can probably just pick either one of the slots, and it'll give you a boost. So I think I've talked way long enough about the characteristics of this vehicle. Let's jump into a battle and see what this thing is capable of when it goes into those situations when someone runs in front of the gun. Okay guys, so I've chosen to show you guys 2 gameplays because I want to show off 2 different kind of things. I want to show off a scenario where we win and a scenario where we lose. I want to show off the limitations, but also the very strong points that you have with this kind of vehicle. Now, we're playing on El Khalouf. I've played it a bit, I've increased the speed on the replay a bit because we do not want to sit around and wait all the time. Probably going to do that again because there are a lot of times where I wait, where I sit and I look at what I can shoot. Because the FV215B 183, even though it does have some nice armor on paper, especially on the turret, that armor does not really transcend very well into the gameplay, into the real life situations that you are facing the opponents with when you're playing this tank, because this vehicle, usually when it gets spotted, people will be focusing you and they will be spamming gold, because at tier 10 you always have to expect that players will be slinging gold shots at you. And I'm no exception. These 2 gameplays are basically gold only, right? So keep that in mind. I'm playing this vehicle almost only with HESH, also to show you off what HESH is capable of and why you should be using HESH when you're playing this tank. Because obviously HESH is the big superstar. 979 damage, just like that, very, very casual. That was an extreme low roll with the HESH shell because that one penetrated. And now we have the next opponent, it's a T62A. But what you can see right here is I'm trying to keep the distance, but I want to support these guys. I don't want them to be overrun by all of those vehicles in the 1 and 2 area there. But also, there are some limitations. These high explosive changes have also had quite an impact on vehicles that are really dependent on these high explosive rounds. And you can see right there, the T62A, we hit him in the tracks. It still did almost 400 damage, but the usual damage that we would have done without penning prior was about 700. So we are losing 400 damage because of the new high explosive mechanics. Now, you can think of that whatever you like, if you dislike it, if you like it. It's not important because it's in the game and you have to adapt to it. I knew that there was a very slim chance of me penetrating that shot, but I still did it because I want to do damage. Because the amount of times that you can deal damage because of the DPM or because the reload time is quite low, so you have to get as much damage as you can, because if you get overrun, you have a very long reload time, and if you do not penetrate your shots, you will not get a lot of damage. That is really important. That is why you need to know what tier 10 is about, what kind of vehicles you're going up against, where the weak spots are, and you can't just point and click somewhere and do about 1,000 or 2,000 damage in a single shot. That only works on vehicles that do not have any armor. That only works on tanks when you know the weak spots. And that's something that you have to keep in mind. You can see that this gameplay is basically, we have almost overrun the enemies, but if you look at the HP of our guys over there in that corner, most of these guys have lost a ton of HP, and there are still 2 tier 10 artillery pieces in the game that you have to keep in mind of. We do have 2 or 3 tier 10 tank destroyers that are full HP. That's me and 2 Gorilla. And right there you can see Manticore. This tank has 0.35 accuracy. Now, I have to be honest, I don't really feel the 0.35 accuracy when I'm playing this tank. And we casually just smacked that Manticore for 1400, and he's taken out of the game. Very fun game probably for that Manticore. He was like, yes, now I'm gonna move in, I'm gonna spot some guys because we really need to take out some of these vehicles. Then he gets smacked for 1400, goes back to the garage and never plays the Manticore again. Either way, I'm gonna speed this up a bit because now we're just kind of trying to move into the enemy base, and you can see disaster strikes. We lose 2 more tanks, and we probably lose 1 more vehicle in just a second, the 60 TP. Because these guys in the back of their base, they are very defensive. They set up a Gorilla, an E4, 2 artillery pieces supporting this Jagdpanzer E100. He is the spotting line, the front line, and he's definitely getting pampered by our artillery and everyone in there. But we're also going to lose the 60 TP, and we're probably going to lose the Leopard 1 as well because he's so far out in the middle. So now this game has turned into a very interesting kind of engagement. It's a 5 versus 4 situation where we still have 2 Gorillas sitting in the back because Gorilla players are very careful. They don't have a lot of HP, and they do not want to lose their HP without any reason. Now for me, I shouldn't have been this careful maybe, but at the same time I also value my HP, and I just want to one-shot tanks. I do not want to get into awkward engagements where I might be a target, but I might not be able to inflict some damage because getting those weak spots up close when the enemies are facing you is kind of difficult. So I managed to move up into the position where the E4 was last spotted, and we have artillery piece last spotted as well. But I'm waiting for the Gorilla 15s because I don't want to be the one that goes in there, spots the targets, then gets knocked out, and then we do the same thing with every single Gorilla. You can see the Gorilla on our team just spotted the enemy Gorilla, and he's sitting on top of that little hill trying to spot anything that's coming in from the back end of the map or from that little ridgeline over there. So I'm waiting for the perfect moment to know where the E4 is. My last known place for the E4 is over here, but someone spots our artillery piece, and I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, even better, we have an E4 over here, he notices us, we pen him, he dies, well, and that's game over for the Gorilla, for the E4. That's what can happen when you play this tank. That's how fast it can go, because getting penned by that round, it can do up to 2,188 damage in the worst case scenario. Well, you don't really have any choice of surviving that. Unfortunately, our shot right there misses the T92. That one came in clutch. We're just waiting for the Gorilla to die. Artillery smacks him for another 700, and yeah, this game ends up being a win. I don't think we have to look into this anymore. This is kind of like a perfect example where 3 or 4 shots basically give you 4,000 damage because you penned 2 of them. You haven't really done anything all game. You come in, you get 3 kills, you do massive amounts of damage, but at the same time you haven't really done anything. That's what kind of happens when you play either this tank, the FV215B, or the Jagdpanzer E100, because the alpha is just insane with the HESH shells. But let's move on to another game where you'll see the strengths and the weaknesses of HESH shells when they suddenly don't really work as they are intended to work, and where you should have maybe utilized some other shells, for example the AP shell that we have. So the second game we're playing on Manuham Lime, and we're starting this from the beginning. There are not a lot of tank destroyers, but a lot of heavy tanks, so what you can probably expect is a very heavy push coming down the H line into that little corner. There are 2 artillery pieces, which is very important because we'll talk about them in the end as well. But that means that there is a lot of HP to be squashed with the high explosive squash head round. The thing is, very importantly, this starting place, the enemy team actually has to cross an open field. And if you have a light tank or a medium tank or a very ballsy tier 10 heavy tank, these guys can spot the cross. Spotting the cross is a very important thing, because when they do, they allow us tank destroyers in the back. That's why you always have to have tank destroyers sitting here to actually punish all of the guys that are trying to move into that spot. Now you can see what I see. There's a Kranwagen coming around the corner, and I'm just pausing it right now. What are you thinking? What are you expecting this to be? How this is going to be going down? This Kranwagen, obviously, he notices this object 277, and he knows he needs to take him out because he is in a very aggressive spot, very dangerous spot for anyone crossing in. That's a very dangerous crossfire. Well, goodbye. He loses 1,729 HP. That's what happens when you have the HESH shells. That's what happens when you penetrate one of these shells. And I don't want to lie, it happens way more often than it probably should. But there are its limitations, and we'll see them in this match as well. The problem obviously is you don't have the best rate of fire. There is the E100, but unfortunately, let's fly over to the E100 real fast. I just want to see that because we had a side shot on his vehicle, and I know that the E100 doesn't have 200 millimeters of side armor, but he has this this side skirt, which is basically I think a bit of spaced armor, and we hit that side skirt instead of the turret. If we would have hit the turret, that would have been a pen in the ranges of up to 2,000 damage, and this E100 would have been done and dealt with. But since we hit the side skirt, we only did 534 damage. Now, obviously, I maybe fired too soon because a mouse does not have that spaced armor on the side. And that could have been a potential 2,000 damage. Now, you understand what I mean. These HESH shells and this vehicle, you have to be really certain of what are you shooting at. You have to know, and sometimes there's luck involved. A lot of times RNG is involved as well. And yeah, basically, if you manage to shoot the wrong target, or you know, you miss the shot, you lose valuable 22 seconds where you can do nothing. So let's talk about the armor, and let's talk about the one-shot potential. I've mentioned the one-shotting of tanks, and that's what you can do when somebody doesn't pay any attention because they don't know that you're there. I took that chance. That T62A moved around the corner, and he just sat there and he wanted to flank our guys in the north. I smacked him and I punished him with one single shot. And that's the beauty of the HESH shell. I know it's a bit dirty, I know, it's a premium round, but at the same time, I have to say, since it's only 230 millimeters of pen, which is a lot for a premium, for a high explosive shell, but it's 230 millimeters of pen instead of maybe 350 or 400 with a heat shell. I think that's kind of okay, because you still need to be able to hit those weak spots. We can see that right now we're losing the south. They are overwhelming our heavy tanks, and I want to go in there and help these guys out. Now, unfortunately, this tank is not the fastest. 35 kilometers, I think, or 34 kilometers was top speed. Getting that top speed, usually you only get that when you're going downhill. This is a big tank, this is a heavy tank, and it does have armor, but that armor does not always work. You could see that that T62A, he managed to penetrate probably the side or lower plate right there, but it was okay for us because I took that into account. Now, the Kranwagen in this position, now let's talk about it. Being able to hit a Kranwagen in the turret and doing damage, that is something that, yeah, it shouldn't be possible because the Kranwagen is just so strong. But the thing is, hitting the Kranwagen for 328 is a bit of a slap in the face. But obviously that's because they changed the high explosive pen and everything around it. So it makes sense that you don't do a lot of damage to the most heavily armored part of the vehicle. Right there, I kind of have to waste a shot on the E100. And we have 4,800 damage. The last 2 rounds that we fired didn't do massive amounts of damage, but still, at least we took out the E100. Now, the thing is, in this moment in time, I know that I'm in a very, very bad position because I'm way too far at the front. I don't have the mobility to get out of the way. I don't have the reload time to take on 4 tanks, and the next few shots really need to pen. So I really want to choose my shots carefully right now. I'm waiting for these guys to move up. I'm waiting for the Guerrilla 15 to help me, and the artillery and the TVP T50. But artillery, unfortunately, does bounce right off the Object 268 version 4. That gives us a short amount of time to talk about the armor. You could see that we bounced the Object 268 version 4's AP round, and we do it again. Because the armor on this thing isn't actually too bad, especially on the turret. Turret has been improved with the HD model, and it allows you to bounce quite a few shots. But it does have its weak spots, and you can see that right here. This entire bar on top is a weak spot, everything on the side is a bit of a weak spot, and if the player knows what he's doing, they will be able to take care of you. Now let's talk about artillery. This moment right here, I get hit by artillery again, I get splashed, and I actually fire in this moment. We have a side shot at the Object 268 version 4, but I do miss, and I bounce off his spaced armor, and we do 0 damage because we hit one of the strongest parts of his armor, and I think it's the gun mantlet right there. Now that obviously right there happened while I was being fired by artillery, or fired at by artillery. I had a stun, and then you have the accuracy, the gun handling on this vehicle, which isn't always the best, and that can happen. You can actually get a 0 damage round into someone, and that is going to suck very much when that happens, because not being able to do any damage with a HESH shell, that kind of sucks when you have a 22-second reload. So that is one of the downsides when you have to go up against these super heavily armored vehicles, and you really need to find a spot where you can pen them. Unfortunately for us, that Object 268 version 4 learned his lesson. He loaded a heat shell, and he went right after us, and we weren't able to put another one into it. So that allows us a real fast second to talk about what I should have done probably in that situation. I probably should have stayed on that corner at C8, but I didn't want to let that mouse or these guys down there sacrifice themselves for nothing, so I wanted to help them. But at the same time, I maybe should have loaded some AP shells. Now the problem with the Kranwagen and these super heavily armored vehicles, if they're hulled down, is that even with an AP shell, I would have had a very hard time going through the turret of the Kranwagen unless I had a side shot at it. Now, unfortunately for us, we're gonna lose this match because of different factors. We weren't able to hold the south. The north didn't push fast enough, and they didn't come back to help us. And I also didn't play to my strengths. If I would have had an AP shell, I probably would have been able to deal some damage on that Object 268 version 4. But you can see the extreme downsides that you might face when you're playing the FV215B 183 when you do not pen those HESH shells, because you do minimal amounts of damage. And that obviously makes sense, because hitting vehicles that are super heavily armored right there shouldn't allow us to just pen them right there. So it still is a thing that you have to keep in mind, and that's where the skill factor comes in. I still love this tank. I think this is one of the funniest or the funnest tanks I have played ever in this game. It gives me so much joy to one-shot guys and girls, doesn't matter. It's so much fun to just be able to tab once and take off a huge chunk of HP of one vehicle. I know that it is annoying when you're going up against these vehicles and they do that to you. It's always fun when you're handing it out, but it's not always fun when you're receiving these shots. But I think they are kind of balanced in the sense that it still takes aim, it takes a bit of skill to be able to pen all of these vehicles. To make it work, to make every single HESH shell work, you need to know when to fire, need to know when to target up vehicles and which vehicles to go for. And I think that is one of those things. I much rather have this kind of system than the heat shells that just don't really need any kind of aim at all. You just point somewhere and you do your, your standard 400 damage every single time you fire. I'd much rather have this system where I maybe might bounce once or twice because I misplaced a shot, and then finally, because I found that weak spot, because I finally got you, I hit you and I do 1,700 damage, and that just feels a lot more rewarding for me. But that's my personal opinion. I really like this tank, and I think it's one of those guilty pleasures of mine in Wall of Tanks. And I have to say, I got to have some of them as well. I don't spam gold in all the other vehicles. I only spam HESH in this tank, and it's so much fun. So if you can get your hands on the FV215B 183, it's a really cool tank. It's slower than the 4005. It has better gun handling, as I recall, because they nerfed the 4005. And it's just a novel tank because it's the very first British tier 10 tank destroyer. But other than that, I mean, if you have the 4005, it's basically the same kind of idea. It's the same principle. But as always, I'd love to hear what you guys think of the FV215B 183. And I see you guys on the next video. Until then, have a good one.